Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey people, today we're going to take a look at the Attack on Titan deck building game from Cryptozoic Entertainment. This is, of course, based off of the very popular anime of the past few years, Attack on Titan, which I am a huge fan of. If I had actually thought in playing this out, I would have worn one of my Attack on Titan shirts, but this train is leaving the station with or without me, so we got to keep going. But Cryptozoic Entertainment does the Cerberus Engine deck building line of games. DC Comics deck building game, Lord of the Rings, Naruto, Street Fighter, NHL hockey. I could go on and on. Now, if you don't like those games, don't run away just yet, because while this uses the same core system and it can be integrated back into those other games, it does have the same card backs. There are some drastic differences with the Attack on Titan deck building game, starting with the fact that it's purely cooperative. Now, if you are not familiar with the Attack on Titan anime or manga, it's based off of a manga that is still going now, and the second season of the anime should be out next year, the year after. But takes place in, well, I don't know. If you read further ahead in the manga and you know, please don't spoil it in the comments, and I don't want to be spoiled either. But it's either a alternate Earth, future Earth, or just another planet or in universe altogether, where the last remnants of humanity are living behind these gigantic series of walls, like the last human city. But it's a city that spreads over miles, like hundreds of miles. But the last remnants of humanity are behind these walls because these monstrous creatures known as Titans that look like big, naked, weird-looking dudes just roam the Earth or that planet, eating people. So they have to live behind these walls, and basically the story that occurs is like what happens when the walls fail. And there are other Titans that are bigger and nastier and have some sort of secret to them. And there's a ragtag bunch of new recruits, including the main characters Aaron and Mikasa, and Armin Hammer, who have to rally the troops and sort of make a valiant last stand to protect the last remaining humans. So it's super tense, lots of death and destruction, but it's a fantastic show. And that is played out in this game because it's fully cooperative. You're working together, and you actually have to protect each the 5 different walls from the Titans that are coming out and attacking them. But you're doing this with the traditional Cerberus Engine deck building, which is buying cards, equipment, allies, locations, things like that, putting them into your deck in order to fight off the Titans, but you actually have a spatial element where you're moving from wall to wall as well. It's much easier if I just show you what I'm talking about there. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the game. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. The Attack on Titan deck building game is a fully cooperative game for 1 to 5 players. Yes, you can play the game solo, it just requires some minor adjustments, like basically using a couple of dummy characters. Also, like other Cerberus Engine deck building games, you can integrate some of the cards from this set into the other Cerberus games and vice versa, although I don't recommend it, and hence they have victory points on the cards even though they're useless in this particular game, since there won't be a winner. Everyone wins together. The goal of the game is to defeat all 4 of the arch-enemy Titans. The game ends in defeat if all the walls in the city are destroyed, if the main deck runs out, or if 3 or 2 heroes die depending on the number of players. The game uses traditional deck building rules in that you start with inferior cards, purchase better ones that go into your discard pile, and eventually reshuffle and use the latter. In this case, players start with 7 courage cards, which gives you +1 power, which is the main currency of the game that is used to both purchase cards for your deck and finish off Titans, and they also start with 3 thrust cards, which give you 2 movement points, which are used to move around the city. You'll shuffle these and draw 5, which is what you'll draw every turn. Separate face-up decks of wounds and 3D gears are placed nearby. You can always purchase 3D gears with the power that you accumulate on your turn, and in addition to 1 power, they can be put back on the stack to get an additional power and 2 move. This is very important in the beginning of the game if you're having difficulty buying the more expensive cards. Wounds are also always available, but you will never willingly take them. Wounds go into your deck like other cards, and if you start your turn with any of them in your hand, you must play them to the table immediately. If you only have 1 wound, you're fine. It will just stay in play until your next turn. But if you must play any more wounds on the same turn, or if you are forced to gain a new wound into your deck on the same turn that you have one in play, your hero dies. All cards in your hand are destroyed, all wounds that you gain are returned to the stack, and your turn ends. On your next turn, you will pick a new character using what's left of your deck from the previous character. But if too many heroes die, it's game over. Speaking of heroes, everyone gets one randomly or by choice at the start of the game. Every hero has special abilities that activate at particular times, like when you play specific types of cards or when heroes are ambushed. You also get a standee, which represents you in the city. Speaking of that, you'll lay out 5 wall tiles representing the districts of the city and place 2 wall tokens on each one. These are basically the wall's hit points. If they're both removed by Titans, the wall is destroyed, which is bad, by the way. One side of the wall is designated as the inside, the other side is the outside, and the farthest wall from the main deck is indeed the farthest wall out, gameplay-wise. A main deck of cards is created, and at the beginning of the game, 1 card is placed in each district on the inside side, usually. After that, at the beginning of each round, 1 additional card per player is added, always as evenly as possible, with ties broken in favor of the outer walls. The game begins with someone chosen as the start player who will take their turn playing all their cards, followed by the person to their left, etc. When everyone has taken their turn, the round ends and a special end of round stuff happens, like Titans attacking, Titans regenerating, etc. Any card placed on the inside of the walls is beneficial for the heroes and can be bought with power. These include allies, which usually give you power and special effects, maneuvers, which almost always give you extra movement points in addition to special effects, equipment cards, which aren't necessarily remarkable apart from the others, they do kind of the same things, and location cards. Now, every other Cerberus game has locations, but they work differently in this game. You buy them as usual and place them in your deck, but when you play them later, rather than putting them in front of yourself, you put them out into one of the districts, and each district can only hold 1. Players who move their standees to that district can make use of the location's special ability, whatever it may be. Also mixed into the main deck are normal Titans of different sizes. When these come out, they go on the outside of the farthest wall, even if that means several of them stack up. In fact, Titans of any variety always go on the outside of the walls, and they always go to the furthest wall. These are purchased, quote-unquote, the same way as other cards, but they just get removed from the game rather than go into your deck. Some have ambush effects that will negatively impact any player that happens to be in the same district when it comes out. If the Titan remains undefeated at the end of the round, it will remove 1 of the wall tokens from the district, and multiple Titans will deal multiple damage to the wall. Players who happen to be in the district at the same time can take those hits for the wall instead, taking a wound card into their deck, and they can distribute them however they like amongst those players. Regular Titans must be killed all at once. They don't accumulate damage, but their costs are relatively low. To fight a Titan or buy a card, you must be in the right district in the right side of the wall. Movement points will let you get there. Each point of movement you have on a turn moves you either to the other side of the district you're in, or 1 space over to a different district on either side of the wall you're already on. Much worse than the regular Titans are the arch-enemy Titans. 4 of these, 1 of each level from 1 to 4, will be seated in the deck, approximately in every quarter of the deck. These come out and potentially ambush in the same way, but they're much more dangerous. At the end of the round, they remove 2 wall tokens, which is enough to destroy a wall completely, though again, heroes can take these hits as wounds. They might also have nasty ongoing abilities. Furthermore, while archenemies have costs to defeat them, just like the normal ones, you must first drain their hit points to 0, which is also accomplished with power or cards that specifically inflict damage, and damage does carry over, you'll keep track of it with tokens. Then, you may attempt to purchase them, quote-unquote, and defeat them. However, it's not even that easy. When you fight an archenemy Titan after draining its hit points completely, you must decide all the cards you're going to commit to the fight first. You can't use more later. Then, draw a random Titans on the attack card. These can do anything from increasing the cost of the archenemy straight up, or negating certain types of cards that you may have played. To make matters worse, unkilled archenemy Titans regenerate 1 point each round. If a wall gets destroyed, that's trouble. The wall tile itself and the district cards that were attached to it are removed from the game. Then the Titans on that wall simply move to the next wall in line. So they're still there and they're still a threat. Any heroes there simply come off the board and can be placed somewhere else next turn, but now you're in more desperate straits. The game continues like this until either the heroes kill all 4 archenemy Titans or one of the game-ending conditions is met. So as to not keep you in suspense, I really enjoyed Attack on Titan deck building game. I played it 2-player, I played it 3-player, and I played it solo. You can play it solo. Not drastically different or anything like that. I really enjoyed the game, but I have some caveats, and I think that not everyone is necessarily going to enjoy it for different reasons, which I'll get into. First off, let's talk about the theme. There's Attack on Titan, the anime. I'm a huge fan of it. I think the theme is represented particularly well here. Now, it obviously could have been better. When you're talking about a deck building game, it's tough. I've always said that when you're talking about theme, a game has to be very complicated, or a game that is very thematic tends to be very complicated, because in order to get across all the points of the source material, that means more bells and whistles have to be added into the game. That's why, like Legendary, the Marvel deck building game, has so many things you have to keep track of. 2 different decks of cards, other cards you have to keep track of, mastermind cards, all these different types of things. So, Attack on Titan doesn't have as much of that. It's obviously more complicated than your traditional deck building game, and even the other Cerberus engine deck building games. But wall tiles, seeding the deck with the Titans, it's not a huge deal, right? And then when it gets really down to it, it's just a deck building game. So it's hard to be that thematic when that's what you're working with. But the extra stuff that is added here, with the character pieces moving around to the different walls, skirting back and forth, fighting the Titans, inevitably deciding, we're not going to be able to hold this wall. We have to retreat back. The wall's going to get obliterated. We're losing constantly. That is very thematic to Attack on Titan. And if you haven't watched the show, that might not come across, so that may not work for you. And that's one of the caveats I have as to who's going to enjoy this game and who's not. But if you have watched and enjoyed Attack on Titan or read it, you will, I think, if you're like me, that will come across very well. Like, oh yeah, it's just like the show where we're just dying constantly. And we're constantly having to fall back and make tough decisions. And that comes across very well, and I appreciated that. And the spatial element helps a lot with that, as well as all of the characters and their special abilities, which are more like the traditional Cerberus deck building game abilities. But still, it's cool to play as, I can play Mikasa, that's cool. Or Captain Levi. Is it Levi or Levi? I never know. I'm sure I'll get shit for that in the comments. But that is something that would concern me for people who are not into it. In fact, the first game of this I played was 2-player, and it was with someone who has no attachment, not just to Attack on Titan, but to anime in general. And so his opinion of the game was more negative than mine, and I think that if he had liked the anime, I think that would have made quite a bit of a difference. Now, the other caveat to it is that this game is brutally difficult, okay? Which goes hand in hand with the theme, but that is going to be a turnoff for some people. Now, I'm not a stranger to brutally difficult co-op games, and usually I don't care because it's co-op. You're sharing the suffering together. The pleasure of working together and trying to get through and problem solve and figure out how we're going to do this, unless it's just so crushingly, like, ridiculously tough that you're like, well, we never had a chance. When that happens, it sucks. But for Attack on Titan and for other games like Robinson Crusoe that are really difficult, you play it and you're like, okay, we got creamed, but I feel like we could do better if we do this, this, and this, and if luck is with us a little bit more, which is always a factor in a cooperative game, is luck. So it didn't bother me as much. It might turn off some people. The one issue I have, though, objectively, is that a lot of this is card play. So, like any other Cerberus deck building game, cards are coming out. It happens a little bit differently here because it's based on the number of players, blah, blah, and they have to go to different districts, which is cool, actually, because that forces you to move around. But how well you do is very dependent on what cards come out early. In one of our games, we were flooded with expensive cards right off the bat. And when that happens, and you can't buy anything other than the maneuver gears, the 3D maneuver gears that just give you a bit of a boost, when that happens, you can fall behind. And when you fall behind, you're going to die. Because the very first arch enemy Titan is really hard, okay? Right off the bat. They do not go easy on you in this game. You're supposed to have some time to build up, but if you are stuck with a bunch of expensive cards in that time, it's going to be very, very difficult, which is not to say you can't snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, but usually you're being handed defeat very easily from the jaws of victory. So that is a concern, but what's here... The things that work well, I think. The Cerberus deck building engine was solid. It didn't need to be changed that much. And there's a lot of really cool cards, really game-changing cards. When you get one of those bombs, you're like, yes, we're going to win. Or we're still going to die, but we're more likely to win. And there's a lot of cool things here with how you can... Now there's damage as opposed to just the power currency. Power buys you cards and can ultimately defeat the Titans, but now you have to deal damage. So that's stuff like, well, if I buy too many damage cards, I can't buy anything. Also the same thing with movement. If I buy too many movement cards, well, great, it's good to be versatile, but that's not going to win us any battles. So that's a tough sort of needle to thread. Like, how do we do this balance here? And so that works very well. Fighting the Titans, the arch enemy Titans, is so brutally difficult that I actually recommend not using the, I forget the proper name of the Titan Terror deck or whatever it is, that you have to flip a card from every time you choose to fight one, because that is incredibly demoralizing. The first time you play... Before you play, look at that deck and go through it and realize how tough it is before you just say, like, oh, I have just enough power to fight the archenemy Titan. I guess I'll just do it. No. You have to have overwhelming amounts of power before you can even attempt that. And so I wish the deck was more forgiving. I wish there were more cards in there that were just like, it's just +1 to power. Or nothing. You get lucky. At least one of those. That might have been a more preferential thing to do. But the normal Titans, like the normal quote-unquote Titans that are also throughout the deck, are not that difficult. And that makes you feel at least a little bit more powerful, like, I can do something. But I think the best and most thematic and exciting part of the game is realizing that sometimes you just have to let a district fall, because it's going to happen, and fall back, make your stand, buff yourselves up some more, and get ready to fight again. And when you do that, and when you are successful, it's great. So I really like the cooperative aspects of this game. It's handled much, much better than the co-op Crisis mode that was an add-on to the DC Comics deck building game, also a Cerberus engine game. So much better with the cooperative here. And it works well solo. It works well at the 3 different player accounts I've played it at. So, again, this is going to be very selective. If you are a fan of the show, and obviously you're watching this so you're into board games to some degree, yes, you should definitely try it. I think you'll really enjoy it as much as I did. If you're not a fan of the show, but you love deck building, you love brutal cooperative games, you might still like it a lot. But I definitely think if you didn't like the other Cerberus engine deck building games, as different as this is, the core of it is still the same. So you might hate the randomness, you might hate just, it's just not as... The deck building part, at least, is not as strategic as other deck building games. But I do like the strategy of how you have to move around, consolidate your forces, help each other out, so on and so forth. So I like it quite a bit. If you go into it with that knowledge in mind, the things that I said that are kind of caveats, I think you can enjoy it too. That's the Attack on Titan deck building game from Cryptozoic Entertainment. I recommend it.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.